Jumatatu mpaka Ijumaa, moja kwa moja kutoka VOA Swahili.
Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Yuot. It's Wednesday, January 11th. This is Africa 54.
Uganda says its Ebola outbreak is over after 4 months and at least 55 deaths, as VOA's Paul Ndiho reports. Zimbabwe moved to stop healthcare worker walkouts by making them illegal, as David Doyle details. New York-based Bitgreen and partners are backing the building of a big hydropower facility in Sierra Leone, meant to bring energy to 500,000 people there. All this and much more on today's Africa 54.
Uganda declares an end to an Ebola outbreak that claimed the lives of 55 people. Paul Ndiho has more.
Uganda's health ministry on Wednesday declared the end of a nearly 4-month Ebola outbreak that it initially struggled to contain, but was then able to bring under control, despite the absence of a proven vaccine against the viral strain in question.
Having registered no new Ebola case, despite sustained intense surveillance, both at the epicenter districts and nationally, I now confirm that all transmission chains have been fully interrupted and take this opportunity to declare that the outbreak is over and Uganda is now free of active Ebola transmission.
Tedros Ghebreyesus, Director General of the World Health Organization, on Twitter congratulated Uganda for what he said was a robust and comprehensive response which has led to today's victory against Ebola. Quote, "Congratulations to Uganda's government, health workers and communities for your dedication to ending the Ebola outbreak in less than 4 months. We thank our donors and partners for swiftly mobilizing resources and vaccine developers for making candidate vaccines." The outbreak had spread to 9 Ugandan districts, including the capital Kampala, raising fears of rapid spread across the East African region. According to WHO, an outbreak of the disease ends when there are no new cases for 42 consecutive days, twice the incubation period of Ebola. Since the beginning of the outbreak, there has been 142 confirmed cases, 55 confirmed deaths, and 87 recovered patients. Uganda, which shares a porous border with the Democratic Republic of Congo, has experienced several Ebola outbreaks, most recently in 2019 when at least 5 people died. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Zimbabwe has a new law outlawing organized protest by healthcare workers following their strike action in a protracted dispute over pay. David Doyle has the details.
Strike action like this could now see health workers in Zimbabwe facing a fine or up to 6 months in jail. President Emmerson Mnangagwa signing a bill into law on Tuesday that outlaws organised protests by healthcare workers. The new legislation comes after a protracted battle over salaries. Thousands of doctors and nurses at state-run hospitals went on strike last year and indeed in previous years, demanding a hefty raise and wages in US dollars. That was due to a slide in the local currency and steep inflation that eroded the value of their earnings.
I cannot pay my rent, I cannot eat. So the situation is bad and our cause is justified.
Many nurses in Zimbabwe earn less than $100 a month. The southern African country has seen an exodus of nurses and doctors that has left hospitals understaffed. In November, Zimbabwe's Health Services Board said over 4,000 health workers had left the country since 2021.
David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. Let's get more perspective on Zimbabwe's law outlawing organized protest by healthcare workers. Joining me live via Skype from Huntersville, North Carolina is Dr. Simbiso Ranga, an internal medicine specialist and a native of Zimbabwe. Dr. Simbiso, welcome to Africa 54.
Hi, Esther. Thank you for having me in the program.
Thank you, Doctor. Now, what's your reaction to this new law? And does taking medical personnel to jail help in any way the crippled health sector in Zimbabwe?
Esther, it's very unfortunate that the health sector in Zimbabwe has collapsed in so many ways. We have hospitals that don't have medications, and we also don't have basic equipment like sutures and other basics like gloves. And unfortunately, healthcare workers have not been spared. So they are being grossly underpaid. As a result, obviously, they have had protests and other ways to try to have everybody pay attention to the needs of healthcare workers. It's kind of a system where everything has fallen apart and the healthcare workers are crying for help. And I think that this law is not going to solve the problem. It's going to make it worse, going to increase the brain drain that is already experienced in the health sector.
And you're one of those who are right here in the United States working as a medical doctor. What do you think then needs to be done to fix the health sector in Zimbabwe?
What I believe should be done, Esther, is we need a wholesome set of activities that prioritizes healthcare. I know that the government gets a lot of support from development partners to support initiatives like, combating HIV, AIDS, malaria, and so forth. I think that if the government matched some of that support in financial terms, that would help solve some of this healthcare crisis that we are witnessing. There's a lot of lives that are being lost because the government is not paying enough attention to the needs of the health sector.
Doctor, we understand that besides this law, that the government is also barring medical personnel who are seeking jobs elsewhere, going abroad. They're being denied visas or even passports, so they don't travel outside of Zimbabwe. Is this constitutional?
I don't believe it's constitutional. I think what the government is doing is what we call command everything. Command agriculture, command healthcare. There is a problem in the health sector, and all they are doing is asking for more from the workers who are working day and night to provide service. They're actually subsidizing the needs. The government, they're subsidizing the government, in fact, because they are going above and beyond, being paid very little. So instead of punishing them by jailing them for protesting or going on industrial action and denying them visas to be able to travel to other countries, what they should be doing instead is work with the health sector, the nurses, the doctors, and say, what are your needs? What are the needs of the hospitals, which are inadequately staffed, to say, how can we fix this? Instead of saying, let's just ask them to do more, which is what the government is essentially saying. I don't think that's going to work. I think we need more support, financial support. We need more budgetary support. Right now, they say they are devoting 11% of the budget to healthcare. I think it should be about 30% or so. If we just did that, it's going to help ease the problems we are seeing in the health sector.
Dr. Simbiso, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you.
Dr. Simbiso Ranga is an internal medicine specialist in Huntersville, North Carolina, and a native of Zimbabwe. In the United States, thousands of nurses are striking at two New York City's major hospitals. The walkout began Monday after contract negotiations stalled over staffing and salaries nearly 3 years into the coronavirus pandemic. As many as 3,500 nurses at Montefiore Medical Center in Bronx and about 3,600 at Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan are off the job. The privately owned hospitals are postponing non-emergency surgeries and diverting ambulances to other medical centers. A nurse at Mount Sinai Hospital says it's not about the money.
So the nurses at Mount Sinai have basically come together to say that we're tired of being exploited, we're tired of our patients being abused, and most of all, we're tired of seeing them not get the care they deserve. We came into nursing to take care of people because we care about them. We come from compassion. And it's very difficult to come into the hospital every single day and know that we're not able to give them the care that they truly deserve. These hospitals have shown that all they care about is profits, but we are no longer treating patients like transactional items. They are people and they deserve respect, and that's why we're out here striking. It's not about money, it's actually about saving lives.
Montefiore and Mount Sinai are the last of a group of New York hospitals with nursing contracts that expired simultaneously. Nuveen, a U.S.-based asset management company, says it plans to increase its investments in Africa. Nuveen also announced that it plans to significantly grow the current $2 billion portfolio of its businesses in Africa through fixed income, equity, private equity, natural capital, and infrastructure. To learn more about Nuveen's plans to grow its investment portfolio in Africa, VOA's Peter Clotty spoke to Seyun Salami, the company's chief financial officer.
We convened the food security program in our office, in New York. And we were blessed with the presence of, President Lazarus, of Malawi, Ambassador Cindy McCain, and I would say a lot of others who are either experts and or investor or folks who are part of trying to help solve, the issues around food security across the globe. That interaction, has helped us unlock newer partnership of like-minded organizations, both in the public and private, that quite frankly will make our renewed entrance into Africa a much more easier journey for us. And I use the word journey because, again, as a long-term investor, right, this is going to be a journey for us. And there's an African proverb, which I think everyone is aware of now. If you want to go, quick, you kind of travel alone, but if you want to go really well, you travel with a group, right? And for us, this renewed, focus group with government agencies, international agencies, we expect them to make our journey much more easier. And from last week, I think we had a chance to, the last count, almost 49 African countries and the African Union, were there, in addition to other business organizations, like us, who again are keenly focused on, helping drive the agenda, which for us, creates all kinds of very viable opportunities, investment opportunities. So being within like-minded organizations trying to solve problems as big as the ones that Africa has outlined, I think give us some level of confidence.
That was VOA's Peter Clotty speaking with Seyun Salami, the Chief Financial Officer of Nuveen. 3 years of drought are drying up Tunisian reservoirs, threatening harvests that are critical to the North African country's battered economy. Now the government is being forced to raise tap water prices for homes and businesses. Since September, only 110 million cubic meters of rain has fallen in Tunisia, about 1/5 of the normal rate. Officials in the Farmers Union and the main trade union warn that grain crops will suffer, adding to existing problems of food supply. As climate change has accelerated, heat across the Mediterranean region has risen in recent summers. Winter rains have repeatedly diminished in North Africa, causing agricultural problems from Morocco to Tunisia. In Ethiopia, Tigray forces who fought a 2-year war against the federal government began handing over its heavy weaponry to the National Army as part of an African Union-led peace process on Tuesday. The demobilization of Tigray forces is seen as central to the November 2nd ceasefire agreement, alongside the restoration of services, resumption of humanitarian and withdrawal of Eritrean troops. The weapons handover was overseen by a monitoring team comprising members of the two sides and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development. The World Bank has downgraded its 2023 global growth forecast to 1.7% from its June projection of 3%, as the slowing economy is facing elevated inflation, higher interest rates, reduced investment, and disruptions caused by Russia-Ukraine conflict. According to the Global Economic Prospects report released in January, this is the lowest growth rate outside of the global recession since the early 1990s. Given the fragile global economic conditions, any new adverse developments such as higher than expected inflation, escalating geopolitical tensions, and a resurgence of the COVID-19 pandemic could push the global economy into recession, marking the first time in more than 80 years that two global recessions have occurred within the same decade.
Small states are quite vulnerable, and over the past 3 years, after they contracted by about 11%, they experienced very weak recovery. They are telling us the type of impact of these multiple crises having on developing economies.
According to COAS, the risks brought by climate factors to the global economy also need people's attention, as this may pose a broader risk of fragmentation of global trade investment. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, in our tech report, a 27-megawatt hydro-powered project is set to bring affordable and renewable energy to Sierra Leone. But first, Heidi Adams tells us what's on tap for Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, we'll take a look at Ethiopia's future and the prospect for lasting peace. Also, my conversation with the Executive Director of the International Trade Center, Pamela Coke-Hamilton, about how the African Continental Free Trade Area can unlock global and local opportunities for women-owned businesses. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
In other news, newly released numbers reveal that Ghana's December inflation reading was 54%, the West African nation's highest since April 2001, when it almost hit 60%. Prices rose the most in the category of housing, water, electricity, gas, and fuel. A Liberian man convicted of 22 counts of war crimes, including rape, murder, and an act of cannibalism, is seeking to overturn the judgment at an appeals trial that opened Wednesday in Switzerland. Aliou Kosia also faces new charges of crimes against humanity. And new information has been revealed in the death of a Kenyan LGBTQ activist, Edwin Chiloba, whose body was found dumped in a metal box on the side of the road. The government chief pathologist says he died of asphyxia and was also suffocated with socks crammed in his mouth. The corruption scandal at the European Parliament deepened this week as officials said they would seek to lift immunity on two lawmakers accused of taking bribes from the Gulf state of Qatar. As Henry Ridgwell reports, the investigation could impact economic ties between Europe and Qatar, a key supplier of energy.
Italian member of the European Parliament, Andrea Cozzolino, and his Belgian colleague, Mark Tarabella, are the latest European lawmakers caught in a corruption scandal that has rocked Brussels. Both men deny any wrongdoing. Following a year-long investigation, Belgian police last month raided offices and homes linked to current and former MEPs. They discovered around $1.6 million worth of cash. 150,000 euros, about 158,000 US dollars, were discovered in the home of Greek European Parliament Vice President Eva Kaili, December 9th. She is accused of taking bribes from the Persian Gulf state of Qatar.
The purpose of the bribery was to favor this Gulf country in the economic, financial, and political decisions of the European Parliament.
The European Parliament voted to strip Kaili of her role as Vice President December 13th. In November, before the police operation, she spoke in favour of Qatar to European lawmakers, accusing critics of hypocrisy.
They committed to a vision by choice and they opened to the world. Still some here are calling to discriminate them. They bully them and they accuse everyone that talks to them or engages of corruption. But still, they take their gas.
Kaili's partner, a European Parliament assistant, and two others are also accused of taking Qatari money. They all deny the accusations. Some EU lawmakers are calling for recent policy on Qatar to be re-examined, including a vote to liberalise visas for Qatari citizens.
Apparently, they try to exert influence on decision-making regarding this legislation. This legislation has already been passed. It has been suspended now.
Qatar denies trying to bribe EU officials. It has warned that relations with Europe are at risk. Germany and Belgium are among European nations to have signed deals to buy Qatari liquefied natural gas as the bloc tries to wean itself off Russian energy in the wake of Moscow's invasion of Ukraine.
Qatar, with its developed infrastructure, in its relative proximity to Europe, will be an important player and will be ever more important for overall gas imports to Europe.
Qatar was also angered by European criticism of its human rights and equality laws during last month's Football World Cup in the Gulf state.
And it also affected, I think, some rather deeply rooted issues related to culture and religion, which should better not be blended with the World Cup or other political issues. But I think the bilateral relations can overcome this period because it's in both interests to cooperate.
The President of the European Parliament has warned that the criminal proceedings are damaging trust in the EU and everything it stands for. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
It's time for our tech segment, and joining us now is our technology reporter, Paul Ndiho. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Esther. Thank you. Bitgreen, a company building blockchain's epicenter for sustainability and impact investing, is partnering with green infrastructure developer Cell and an international climate action platform to build BitMai, hydroelectric facility in Sierra Leone. The coalition of stakeholders hopes to raise $10 million for the facility. The 27-megawatt Pampana River hydropowered project will ease the region's energy poverty, bringing affordable renewable energy to 500,000 homes in Sierra Leone. For more insight, I'm joined by Adam Carver, CEO and founder of Bitgreen, based in New York City. Welcome to Africa 54.
It's terrific to be here. Thank you for having me.
Let's start by you telling me what you've been up to. You are a man on the verge of perhaps one of the most important power plants in West Africa. Tell me, what is it that you've done to this point?
We partnered with an organization named the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. That's a group that's led by the Rockefeller Foundation, IKEA Foundation, and Bezos Earth Fund. And my company is named Bitgreen. We're a blockchain project that's committed to forwarding sustainable initiatives throughout the world, particularly in the global south, related to providing financing for middle-class lending and financial inclusion, as well as financing for renewable energy projects and other infrastructure projects that can enable those countries and those communities to leapfrog into kind of a new infrastructure and industrial complex.
I'm particularly interested in knowing why you chose, of all places, you chose Sierra Leone to be like the base.
Because I love the music. What happened was that the Global Energy Alliance had been working in Sierra Leone for many years, and they have deep relationships with the government as well as a very prominent energy developer named Searl, S-E-R-L. And so we were introduced to Searl via the Global Energy Alliance. And one of the primary reasons why Sierra Leone was attracted is because the country has suffered under a energy poverty regime for many, many decades. About 75% of the population lives without regular access to electricity, as well as 95% of the rural population. And so, number one, there's a demand for electricity. Number two, there's a viable access point for clean hydroelectric electricity along the Pampana River around an area known as the Betmai Falls.
When you talk about energy crisis, Sierra Leone is not just alone. When you go across the entire continent, they have a power crisis issue. Do you, in the future, in near future, plan maybe to expand this project to other countries that could benefit from what you're trying to do?
Energy poverty and energy challenges are not only endemic to Sierra Leone. They exist throughout the African continent and elsewhere. Sierra Leone is just our first project on the continent, and there are a pipeline of other initiatives that we're going to pursue after we're able to complete this one project.
When you talk about a blockchain, a lot of people don't understand this new term or this new technology. Maybe, if you don't mind, would you mind explaining what you're trying to do in those terms?
In the most simplistic term, it's similar to a computer program or a computer operating system. Many people may have a cell phone, right? And perhaps they have a phone that runs on an operating system known as Android. For example, Android's an operating system. And then on top of your phone, you have many different apps. Well, a blockchain, in many ways, is very similar to the basic program that your phone runs on, that it then enables other applications or apps to be deployed and executed. The chain of those blocks is known as a blockchain, and it is a chronological and extraordinarily transparent form of operating a computer system.
A lot of people are opposed to new technology. And in your particular case, you bring in something that even out here in the West, it's not a popular thing. How are people receiving it, let's say, in Africa, in Sierra Leone? What's your experience like trying to convince people to jump on board with this kind of initiative that you have for them?
It's our responsibility as ambassadors of the blockchain technology sector that we are able to explain ourselves to people in a manner that meets them where they are, whether they have never heard of our technology or whether they are familiar with it and maybe they've already participated. What is most important here, and the true equalizer, is what the technology can do. It doesn't really matter the story that we weave or the amount of capital that's flown in, that has arrived and been invested, or the capital that's sitting on the sideline waiting to be deployed. The only thing that really matters is, can the technology, once deployed, do a superior job? Bitgreen's purpose here is actually to harness this blockchain technology in its many different evolving strengths to work toward the betterment for all people, and especially in markets that have been highly ignored and neglected by other more traditional technologies.
Thank you so much, Adam. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much. I really came here with gratitude, and I enjoyed our conversation.